When I was a boy, I had little idea that a single afternoon project with my dad would shape my entire future. When I was 10 years old, the course of my life shifted in a way that only hindsight could reveal. It all started with a Saturday afternoon project with my father. He came home one day holding a bundle of wooden planks, a box of nails, and a well-worn hammer. He declared that we were going to build a birdhouse. At the time, I didn't think much of it, just another task to fill the weekend, but looking back, that day planted a seed of passion that would eventually grow into something far bigger. The first thing I noticed as we worked together was the smell of fresh cut wood. It lingered in the garage as sawdust swirled under the afternoon light streaming through a narrow window. My father showed me how to measure, mark, and cut the pieces to size. It wasn't perfect, my hands fumbled with the saw, and my measurements were far from precise. But my dad didn't mind. He patiently guided me through each step, letting me hammer the nails and fit the pieces together. By the end of the day, we had a slightly crooked but sturdy birdhouse. When we hung it in the backyard, I felt a rush of pride as a couple of sparrows investigated their new home. From that moment on, I started noticing woodwork everywhere. The old creaking kitchen door became my next project. For months, it had swung open and shut with an irritating clatter that grated on everyone's nerves. Armed with my dad's toolbox and a stubborn determination, I decided to fix it. I spent hours studying the hinges and experimenting with different adjustments. My early attempts failed miserably, but eventually, I got it right. When the door swung silently for the first time, my mom beamed with appreciation. That single moment solidified something in me, the joy of creating solutions with my own hands. My parents quickly realized that this wasn't just a fleeting interest. They started supporting my budding curiosity in every way they could. My dad gifted me a small set of tools, a hammer, a tape measure, a saw, and a few other basics. To me, it felt like a treasure chest, filled with endless possibilities. My mom found a local community center offering DIY workshops, and every Saturday morning, I'd find myself surrounded by scraps of wood, glue, and nails, learning new skills from seasoned carpenters. I was often the youngest in the group, but that only seemed to endear me to the older craftsmen, who went out of their way to share their expertise. Back home, my parents cleared a small corner of the garage for me to set up my own workspace. It became my sanctuary. I scavenged wood from anywhere I could find, construction site offcuts, discarded furniture, and even fallen branches from the woods behind our house. I started small, picture frames, wooden boxes, and shelves. Some of my creations were gifts for friends and family, and their encouragement spurred me on. Seeing their smiles when they received something I'd made filled me with a sense of accomplishment that few other things could match. Over time, my projects became more ambitious. By the age of 12, I had built my first piece of furniture, a coffee table. The legs were a bit uneven, and the finish wasn't perfect, but it was sturdy and functional. My parents placed it proudly in the living room, and every time a visitor commented on it, my mom would say, "Our son made that." Their pride in my work fueled my determination to improve. Looking back, those years were pivotal. They weren't just about learning how to work with wood, they were about discovering the joy of creativity, problem-solving, and craftsmanship. Each project, no matter how small, was a step forward, a lesson learned, and a spark that kept my passion alive. It all started with a birdhouse, but in my mind, I began to dream of building so much more. Little did I know, those dreams would one day take me much farther than I could imagine. By the time I reached my teenage years, my love for woodworking had fully taken root, but it had also grown into something more profound. I no longer just fixed things because they were broken or built items for the sake of creating. Instead, each project became a way to explore new ideas, test my limits, and, quite frankly, escape into a world where my hands could shape reality. There's something deeply satisfying about turning chaos into order, and in our garage, surrounded by tools and scraps of wood, I could do just that. Around this time, I started noticing how often people discarded perfectly good furniture simply because it had a few blemishes or was slightly outdated. Our neighbor, for example, was about to throw out a perfectly functional chair because one of the legs wobbled. I offered to fix it for him. It took me less than an hour to sand down the uneven edges, re-glue the joints, and drive a few sturdy nails into place. When I returned it to him, good as new, he was astonished. He tried to pay me, but I refused. I didn't do it for money. I did it because it felt good to take something broken and make it whole again. Word started to spread. Soon, people from our neighborhood began dropping off old furniture for me to repair. Some even asked if I could make custom items for them, a shelf for their kitchen, a small table for their hallway, or a simple box to store tools. I didn't have a proper business or even much of a plan, but I never said no. Every project felt like an opportunity to learn something new, to test myself. Sometimes I succeeded, other times I failed spectacularly. But each experience taught me valuable lessons about craftsmanship, patience, and resilience. One particular project still stands out in my memory. A family friend asked me to build a wooden chest as a wedding gift for his daughter. I was flattered, but also nervous. This wasn't just a repair job or a simple shelf, it was something that would hold sentimental value. I spent weeks designing and constructing that chest. I chose the best wood I could afford, carefully sanded and polished every surface, and even learned how to carve a floral pattern into the lid. When I finally delivered it, the look of joy on their faces was worth every sleepless night. That chest wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was a testament to what I could achieve if I poured my heart into my work. Despite my growing confidence, I often felt constrained by my lack of resources. My tools, while cherished, were basic. My workspace was cramped and my materials were whatever I could scavenge or afford with pocket money. I started dreaming about what I could do with better equipment, more space, and a steady supply of high-quality wood. But those dreams felt out of reach. I was just a teenager, after all. My parents were supportive, but they had their own financial challenges, and I didn't want to burden them with my ambitions. Still, the thought lingered in the back of my mind, what if I could turn this into something bigger? In school, I was a decent student, but not exceptional. Math and science came naturally to me, but I struggled to stay interested in subjects that didn't seem immediately useful. My teachers often commented on my potential but also warned me about the dangers of focusing too much on hobbies. They didn't see woodworking as a viable career path, and to be fair, I couldn't blame them. Even I wasn't entirely sure where this passion would lead. Still, every time I stepped into the garage and picked up a piece of wood, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. One day, a small but pivotal event occurred that changed how I viewed my work. I was walking home from school when I passed a new furniture store that had opened in town. The items displayed in the window were stunning, sleek, modern, and impossibly expensive. I remember pressing my face against the glass, marveling at the craftsmanship. But then a thought struck me, I could make that. Not only that, but I could make it better. The idea filled me with both excitement and frustration. I had the skills, or at least the potential to develop them, but what I lacked was the means. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that furniture store, about the possibilities if only I had the tools, the materials, the capital to turn my ideas into reality. It was the first time I felt the weight of ambition pressing down on me. Up until then, woodworking had been a joyful escape, a way to lose myself in the rhythm of creation. Now, it was becoming something more, a dream I couldn't ignore. I started sketching designs in a notebook, filling page after page with ideas for furniture, toys, and even intricate mechanisms made entirely of wood. I experimented with small-scale models, using whatever scraps I could find. Some of my classmates teased me, calling me the carpenter as if it were an insult. But I didn't care. In my mind, I was building a future, one nail and one plank at a time. Looking back, those were some of the most formative years of my life. I didn't have much, no fancy tools, no funding, no connections. But I had something far more valuable, a burning desire to create, to build, to transform raw materials into something meaningful. I didn't know it yet, but that drive would eventually open doors I never thought possible. The more my love for woodworking grew, the more my parents went out of their way to support me. They weren't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but they made sure to encourage my passion whenever they could. It's only now, looking back, that I can fully appreciate the sacrifices they made to help me pursue something they barely understood but believed in wholeheartedly. It started with small gestures. My dad, who had always been a practical man, gave me my first real set of tools. It wasn't a big, shiny kit you'd find in a hardware store, but a collection of second-hand items he'd carefully pieced together. The hammer had a worn wooden handle, the screwdriver was slightly chipped, and the saw was older than I was. But to me, that box of tools was a treasure chest. I felt like I had been given the keys to a kingdom, one I could shape with my own hands. At the same time, my mom found ways to nurture my interest in more creative ways. One day, she came home with a stack of magazines she'd picked up from a local thrift store. They were filled with images of handcrafted furniture, detailed how-to guides, and articles about master carpenters who had built careers out of their passion. I spent hours poring over them, marking the pages that inspired me the most and trying to replicate the designs on a smaller scale. Eventually, she signed me up for a series of weekend DIY workshops at the local community center. The first time I walked into that room, I felt a little out of place. I was by far the youngest person there, surrounded by middle-aged hobbyists and retirees looking for a way to fill their free time. But the instructors welcomed me with open arms. They saw my eagerness to learn and went out of their way to show me the ropes. I learned how to use more advanced tools, how to measure and cut with precision, and even how to approach woodworking as both an art and a science. Those workshops became the highlight of my week. I'd come home buzzing with ideas, eager to put my newfound knowledge to use. My dad, ever the practical one, decided to take things a step further. He carved out a small corner of our garage and declared it my workshop. It wasn't much, just a couple of makeshift shelves, a workbench he built out of an old door, and a stool, but it was mine. I spent countless hours in that little corner, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and the clinking of tools. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could experiment, fail, and try again without fear of judgment. One Christmas, my parents surprised me with a gift that changed everything, a book on advanced woodworking techniques. It was a thick, heavy tome filled with detailed diagrams and explanations that opened my eyes to what was possible. I devoured every page, staying up late into the night with a notebook by my side, sketching out new ideas and projects I wanted to try. My parents couldn't afford much, but what they did give me was the freedom to dream. Of course, their support wasn't just material. They were my biggest cheerleaders, always quick to praise my efforts and encourage me to keep going, even when I made mistakes. And there were plenty of mistakes. I can't count the number of times I ruined a perfectly good piece of wood or botched a project so badly that I had to start over. But my parents never made me feel like I'd failed. Instead, they'd say, "Well, what did you learn?" That simple question taught me to view every misstep as an opportunity to grow. One summer, my dad took me on a road trip to visit an old friend of his who ran a small furniture workshop in a neighboring town. The moment we stepped into the shop, I was in awe. The smell of varnish and wood polish filled the air, and every surface was covered with tools, blueprints, and half-finished projects. The owner, a grizzled man with calloused hands, took one look at me and said, "So you're the young carpenter your dad's been bragging about." He spent the afternoon showing me around, explaining his process, and even letting me try my hand at a few tasks. Before we left, he handed me a small block plane and said, "Every good woodworker needs one of these. Use it well." That block plane became one of my most prized possessions. I used it on almost every project, and every time I held it, I thought about the kindness of someone who believed in me enough to invest in my future. Moments like that had a profound impact on me. They reinforced the idea that woodworking wasn't just a hobby, it was something worth pursuing, something that could lead to a fulfilling and meaningful life. Looking back, I realize how much my parents' encouragement shaped the person I am today. They didn't just give me tools or sign me up for classes, they gave me the confidence to believe in myself. They taught me that passion, when paired with hard work and resilience, could open doors I never even knew existed. Their unwavering support laid the foundation for everything that was to come. By the time I turned 17, my fascination with woodworking had evolved into an undeniable skill. What had started as a casual hobby under my dad's guidance had turned into something far greater. My small corner of the garage was no longer just a workshop, it was a place where ideas came to life, and every piece of wood was a potential masterpiece. The transformation wasn't sudden, but it was steady. I had spent years honing my craft, learning from every mistake, and perfecting my techniques. I became known in our neighborhood as the go-to person for any woodworking needs. Whether it was fixing a broken chair or crafting a new bookshelf, I could do it all, and I loved every second of it. My reputation extended beyond just repairs. People started asking for custom creations, one-of-a-kind items that reflected their specific needs and tastes. I remember a neighbor commissioning me to build a set of intricate wooden shelves for her study. She wanted something that combined practicality with elegance, and I poured my heart into the project. I spent weeks sketching designs, selecting the perfect wood, and meticulously carving each detail. When I delivered the finished product, her reaction was unforgettable. She stood there, admiring the shelves with tears in her eyes, and said, "This is exactly what I imagined." Moments like that reinforce my belief that woodworking was more than just a skill, it was a way to connect with people and bring their visions to life. Around this time, I started experimenting with more complex designs and mechanisms. I wasn't content to stick with traditional furniture or simple repairs. I wanted to push the boundaries of what I could create. One of my most ambitious projects was a collapsible dining table that could expand to seat 10 people and fold down to the size of a small desk. It took months of trial and error, but when I finally finished, it was a marvel of both form and function. My parents were so proud that they insisted on showcasing it in our dining room, where it became a conversation piece for years. Despite my growing skill and confidence, there was a part of me that felt restless. I wanted to do more, to create on a larger scale. But the reality of my situation often brought me back down to earth. I was still a high school student, juggling my passion with academic responsibilities. My resources were limited, and while my parents supported me as much as they could, we didn't have the means to fund extravagant projects or a professional-grade workshop. This sense of limitation fueled my determination. I started entering woodworking competitions and exhibitions, showcasing my creations to a wider audience. One of my first entries was a wooden jewelry box with hidden compartments, crafted entirely by hand. It won first place at a regional fair, and the recognition was a turning point for me. For the first time, I realized that my talent could be more than just a local novelty, it could be the foundation for a future. With every competition, my ambition grew. I devoured books on advanced woodworking techniques and studied the works of master carpenters. I watched videos, took online courses, and even reached out to professionals for advice. Every spare moment was spent refining my craft. I started dreaming about what it would be like to open my own woodworking business, a place where I could bring my ideas to life on a larger scale. But as exciting as that dream was, it felt impossibly far away. One of the most challenging aspects of my journey was dealing with self-doubt. As much as I loved woodworking, there were moments when I questioned whether I was good enough to make it a career. I'd see pictures of elaborate, high-end furniture crafted by seasoned professionals and wonder if I'd ever reach that level. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of how far I'd come. I'd gone from building a crooked birdhouse with my dad to crafting intricate, functional pieces that people genuinely cherished. That progress was proof that I was capable of more. There was one pivotal moment that cemented my transition from amateur to prodigy. A local business owner heard about my work and approached me with a unique request. He wanted a wooden display case for his shop, something that would stand out and draw customers' attention. It was the most significant commission I'd ever received, and I threw myself into the project with everything I had. The design was elaborate, featuring curved edges, glass panels, and intricate carvings. It was a daunting challenge, but I knew I couldn't let this opportunity slip away. I spent weeks working on the display case, pouring every ounce of skill and creativity into it. There were moments of frustration when things didn't go as planned, but I refused to give up. When I finally delivered the finished piece, the business owner was speechless. He couldn't believe that someone my age had created something so polished and professional. The display case became the centerpiece of his shop, and word of my work spread even further. That project was a turning point for me. It wasn't just about proving my abilities to others, it was about proving them to myself. I realized that my age or lack of resources didn't define my potential. What mattered was my passion, my dedication, and my willingness to learn and grow. From that point on, I stopped seeing myself as just a kid with a hobby. I was a craftsman, and I was ready to take on whatever challenges came my way. Despite the recognition I'd earned and the growing confidence in my abilities, one obstacle loomed larger than any other: resources. It didn't matter how many commissions I completed or how intricate my designs were, I was constantly running into the hard truth that talent alone wasn't enough to build something sustainable. Every new idea, every project, required materials, tools, and space, none of which came cheap. At 17, I still relied on my parents for much of what I needed. While they supported me with every ounce of encouragement they could muster, our family wasn't in a position to invest heavily in my ambitions. My makeshift workshop in the corner of our garage was bursting at the seams. My tools, though beloved, were a mismatched collection of hand-me-downs and thrift store finds. And the wood I worked with? Most of it came from discarded pallets, old furniture, or whatever scraps I could salvage. I had learned to be resourceful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was working with a ball and chain around my ankles. One particularly frustrating afternoon, I was working on a custom cabinet for a local customer. The wood I'd managed to scavenge wasn't the right quality, and no amount of sanding or staining could hide its imperfections. I completed the project, but I knew it wasn't my best work. As I delivered it, I felt a pang of embarrassment, wondering if the customer could see the flaws that seemed so glaring to me. Though they thanked me and praised my effort, I left their house feeling deflated. I knew I had the skills to do better, but I didn't have the means. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I kept thinking about all the things I wanted to create but couldn't because I lacked the right tools or materials. There were moments when it felt unfair, as though my ambitions were being stifled by circumstances beyond my control. But deep down, I knew that wallowing in frustration wouldn't change anything. If I wanted to overcome this hurdle, I had to find a way, even if it seemed impossible. I started looking for solutions, no matter how unconventional they seemed. I spent hours scouring the internet for contests, grants, or programs that supported young entrepreneurs. I joined online forums and woodworking communities, sharing my work and connecting with people who had walked similar paths. I even reached out to local businesses, asking if they had surplus materials or tools they'd be willing to donate or sell at a discount. Most of the time, my efforts led to dead ends. But occasionally, I'd find a small victory, a bundle of offcuts from a lumberyard or a second-hand tool at a bargain price. It wasn't much, but it kept me going. One day, while researching ways to fund a workshop upgrade, I stumbled across a story about a young artist who had raised money through crowdfunding. The concept was simple: pitch your idea to the public, and if people believe in your vision, they can contribute financially to help you achieve it. The idea intrigued me, but it also terrified me. The thought of putting myself and my dreams out there for strangers to judge felt incredibly vulnerable. What if no one cared? What if I failed? Despite my fears, I decided to take the leap. I spent weeks preparing a campaign, detailing my journey and my aspirations for the future. I filmed a video in my cramped garage, showcasing my work and explaining how much more I could accomplish with better tools and materials. When the campaign finally went live, I held my breath, hoping for even a small response. The first few days were agonizing. A handful of friends and family contributed, but the total was far from what I needed. I began to question whether I'd made a mistake. But then, something incredible happened. A local journalist stumbled upon my campaign and decided to feature my story in the newspaper. The headline read, "Teen Woodworker Dreams Big Despite Small Means." The article struck a chord with people. Within days, my campaign started gaining traction. Donations poured in from strangers who believed in my vision, and messages of encouragement filled my inbox. People shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs, telling me how much they admired my determination. By the end of the campaign, I had not only reached my goal but exceeded it. For the first time, I had the resources to take a real step forward. With the funds, I upgraded my tools, invested in high-quality materials, and even rented a small workshop space outside of my parents' garage. It wasn't a glamorous setup, but it was mine. Walking into that space for the first time felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. For the first time, my dreams felt within reach. But success didn't come without its challenges. As my projects grew in scale and complexity, so did the expectations. I was no longer just a talented kid in a garage, I was someone who people looked to for professional quality work. The pressure was daunting, but it also fueled my determination. Every project became a chance to prove not just my skill, but my resilience. And with every step forward, I felt the gap between my ambitions and my reality grow smaller. Looking back, I realized that those years of struggle were more than just a test of patience. They were a lesson in persistence, resourcefulness, and the power of believing in something bigger than myself. It wasn't just about the money or the tools, it was about proving to myself and the world that even the smallest seeds of a dream can grow into something extraordinary with enough care and effort. After the success of my crowdfunding campaign, my life felt as if it were finally moving in the direction I had always hoped. My new tools and workshop space gave me a fresh sense of purpose. But for all the progress I'd made, one thing remained clear: I was still on my own. Running a woodworking operation, even a small one, was a daunting task, and I often found myself longing for guidance or support. Little did I know, a chance meeting would change everything. It happened on a late spring afternoon. I had just finished delivering a custom bookshelf to a client and decided to stop by a local hardware store to pick up supplies for my next project. As I wandered the aisles, a man approached me. He was tall, with a neatly trimmed beard and the kind of confidence that made him stand out. He introduced himself as Mr. Calloway and explained that he owned a chain of home goods stores in the area. "I've heard about you," he said, his tone warm but serious. "A lot of people are talking about the young woodworker who's been making waves around town. I've seen some of your pieces, and I'm impressed." His words caught me off guard. I wasn't used to receiving praise from strangers, let alone someone as accomplished as Mr. Calloway. I thanked him and explained that I was just getting started, trying to build something meaningful out of my passion. He nodded, as if he understood exactly where I was coming from. "Listen," he said, "I've got a proposition for you. Why don't you stop by my office sometime? I'd love to hear more about your work and see if there's a way I can help." I was skeptical at first. Offers like that often came with strings attached, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to take on more than I could handle. But something about Mr. Calloway's demeanor made me trust him. He seemed genuinely interested in what I was doing, and I figured I had nothing to lose. The following week, I found myself sitting in his spacious office, surrounded by sleek furniture and framed photos of his various ventures. He listened intently as I shared my story, from the crooked birdhouse I'd built with my dad to the custom pieces that had started gaining attention in the community. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You've got something special," he said. "Your work has heart, and people can see that. But if you really want to take this to the next level, you're going to need support, financially and strategically." He went on to explain that he'd started his own business from nothing and knew how hard it was to break through without help. He offered to invest in my workshop, providing the capital I needed to scale up my operations. In return, he wanted a small stake in the business and the opportunity to sell my pieces in his stores. It was a lot to process. On one hand, his offer was everything I'd been hoping for, the chance to expand my business and reach a wider audience. On the other hand, the idea of giving up even a small piece of what I'd built felt like a compromise. I spent days weighing the pros and cons, talking it over with my parents and mentors. Ultimately, I realized that opportunities like this didn't come around often. If I wanted to turn my passion into a career, I had to be willing to take risks. So, I accepted his offer, and just like that, my life changed. Mr. Calloway's investment allowed me to transform my small workshop into a professional-grade studio. I hired a few skilled workers to help with production, purchased high-end equipment, and sourced premium materials. But more than that, his mentorship became an invaluable resource. He taught me about marketing, supply chain management, and the importance of building strong relationships with clients. The first major project under our partnership was a collection of handcrafted dining tables and chairs. It was a challenge. Producing multiple pieces to a consistent standard was a far cry from the one-off custom projects I was used to. But with Mr. Calloway's guidance and the support of my team, we pulled it off. When the collection debuted in his stores, it was an instant hit. Orders poured in, and for the first time, I saw what it meant to scale a business. The experience wasn't without its hurdles. There were moments of doubt, setbacks with suppliers, and the occasional clash of ideas. But every challenge taught me something new, and with each success, my confidence grew. I was no longer just a woodworker, I was an entrepreneur. Looking back, I realized that meeting Mr. Calloway was more than just a stroke of luck. It was a turning point that opened doors I didn't even know existed. His belief in me gave me the courage to dream bigger and the tools to turn those dreams into reality. And while I still had a long way to go, I knew that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. The months following Mr. Calloway's investment were a whirlwind of growth and challenges. With his financial backing and mentorship, my small operation began to take shape as a legitimate business. For the first time, I wasn't just building furniture, I was building a brand. The transformation was exhilarating but also daunting. Every day presented a new learning curve, and every success seemed to uncover another layer of complexity. The first order of business was expanding the workshop. My original garage setup, while sentimental, was far too cramped for the scale of work we were now undertaking. With Mr. Calloway's help, I secured a lease on a modest industrial space on the outskirts of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it had enough room for multiple workstations, storage, and even a small office. Moving into that space felt like stepping into a new world. The hum of machinery, the smell of freshly cut wood, and the buzz of activity all felt like the beginnings of something substantial. Hiring a team was the next big step. Until then, I'd been a one-man operation, relying on my own hands and occasionally roping in my dad for help. Now, I needed skilled workers who could help bring my designs to life. Finding the right people wasn't easy. I interviewed countless candidates, looking for those who shared my passion for craftsmanship and attention to detail. Eventually, I assembled a small but dedicated team. Each person brought a unique skill set, from precision carving to advanced joinery techniques. It was strange at first, delegating tasks that I would have normally done myself, but I quickly learned the value of collaboration. One of our first major projects as a team was a line of dining tables and chairs for Mr. Calloway's stores. The designs were simple yet elegant, combining modern lines with traditional craftsmanship. Producing multiple pieces to a consistent standard was a far cry from the bespoke, one-off creations I was used to. It required meticulous planning, streamlined workflows, and a whole new level of discipline. There were plenty of hiccups along the way, misaligned cuts, delayed material shipments, and the occasional disagreement over methods, but we persevered. When the collection finally launched, the response was overwhelming. Customers loved the balance of quality and affordability, and orders poured in faster than we could keep up. The success of the dining collection proved that we were on the right track, but it also brought its own set of challenges. Scaling up wasn't just about producing more, it was about maintaining the integrity of my work. I was adamant that every piece leaving our workshop had to meet the same standards I'd upheld since the beginning. To ensure this, I implemented a rigorous quality control process. Every piece was inspected multiple times, and any flaws, no matter how minor, were addressed before the product reached the customer. It was a painstaking process, but it was worth it. I wanted my customers to feel the care and effort that went into every piece. As our operations grew, so did our reach. With Mr. Calloway's connections, we began shipping orders to customers outside of our local area. Soon, our furniture was being delivered across the country. Seeing my work in homes and businesses hundreds of miles away was surreal. It reinforced the idea that what we were building was more than just a local venture, it was a brand with the potential to go global. But with growth came new responsibilities. I found myself spending more time managing the business side of things, inventory, logistics, and client relations, and less time in the workshop. It was a bittersweet transition. While I missed the hands-on work, I knew that stepping into a leadership role was necessary to ensure the business's success. To stay connected to my craft, I made it a point to dedicate at least one day a week to working on a personal project. It became my way of staying grounded amidst the chaos. One of the biggest lessons I learned during this period was the importance of adaptability. No matter how carefully we planned, unexpected challenges always arose. A delayed shipment of wood could throw off our entire production schedule, or a sudden spike in demand could leave us scrambling to meet deadlines. Instead of getting frustrated, I learned to approach these moments as opportunities for growth. Each problem we faced forced us to become more efficient, more creative, and more resilient. Looking back, the process of scaling up was as much about personal growth as it was about business growth. I had to learn how to trust others, how to make tough decisions, and how to stay true to my values while navigating the demands of a rapidly expanding enterprise. It wasn't easy, but every challenge reinforced my belief in what we were building. By the end of that year, our small team had accomplished more than I ever thought possible. We'd gone from a cramped garage operation to a full-fledged business with a growing reputation. But even as we celebrated our successes, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The foundation had been laid, but the real journey was only just starting. The transition from a burgeoning local operation to a business with international reach was both thrilling and intimidating. The thought of shipping my handcrafted furniture to far-off places had always felt like a distant dream. Yet, as we gained momentum, opportunities began to emerge that I couldn't ignore. It all started with an unexpected email from a boutique furniture store in London. The owner, a design enthusiast with a keen eye for unique pieces, had stumbled across our work online. She was captivated by the craftsmanship and attention to detail and wanted to stock a collection of our furniture in her store. The request seemed almost too good to be true. Until then, our operations had focused exclusively on domestic sales. International shipping, customs, and logistics were uncharted territory. Still, the opportunity was too significant to pass up. I immediately assembled my team, and we began brainstorming how to make it happen. The first hurdle was understanding the regulations and costs associated with exporting furniture. Thankfully, Mr. Calloway's network included experts in global trade, and with their guidance, we navigated the maze of paperwork and shipping logistics. From selecting durable packaging materials to arranging freight and ensuring compliance with international standards, every step was a learning experience. When the first shipment finally left our workshop bound for London, I felt a mix of pride and anxiety. Would the furniture arrive intact? Would it live up to the expectations of customers on the other side of the world? My fears eased when the boutique owner sent me photos of the pieces on display in her store, beautifully arranged and drawing attention from customers. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and within weeks, we received more orders from her and other European retailers. The success of our international debut opened the floodgates. Soon, inquiries started pouring in from places I had only ever read about: Paris, Tokyo, Dubai, and Sydney. Each new market presented its own challenges. For example, the humid climate in Southeast Asia required adjustments to the types of wood and finishes we used to ensure durability. Meanwhile, the minimalist aesthetic preferred by Scandinavian buyers pushed us to explore sleeker designs. These challenges weren't setbacks, they were opportunities to grow and adapt. As our global presence expanded, so did our infrastructure. I invested in a dedicated logistics team to handle the complexities of international shipping. We partnered with sustainable wood suppliers from around the world to meet the increased demand while staying true to our commitment to ethical practices. Every new step was a balancing act, ensuring that growth didn't come at the expense of quality or integrity. One of the most rewarding moments of this phase came when we received an invitation to showcase our work at an international design fair in Milan. The event was a gathering of the world's most innovative furniture designers and manufacturers, and being included felt like a validation of everything we had built. Preparing for the fair was a monumental effort. We crafted a special collection that showcased the best of our work, pieces that combine traditional craftsmanship with modern design elements. Standing in our booth in Milan, surrounded by my team and our creations, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. Visitors from all over the world stopped to admire our work, ask questions, and share their own stories of craftsmanship and design. By the end of the fair, we had secured partnerships with several high-profile retailers and designers, further solidifying our place on the global stage. Of course, going global wasn't without its challenges. The increased demand stretched our capacity to its limits, and there were moments when it felt like we were chasing a runaway train. I had to make tough decisions, like turning down certain orders to ensure we didn't compromise on quality. There were also cultural differences to navigate, from understanding the preferences of international customers to building relationships with overseas partners. Despite these challenges, the experience was transformative. It forced me to think bigger, not just about the business but about the impact we could have. Seeing our furniture in homes, offices, and stores around the world reinforced the idea that what we were doing wasn't just about selling products, it was about sharing a piece of craftsmanship and passion with people everywhere. Looking back, the leap into the global market was one of the most defining chapters of our journey. It proved that with determination, adaptability, and a willingness to take risks, even the loftiest dreams could become reality. And while I knew there would always be new challenges ahead, I felt ready to face them, fueled by the knowledge that our work had touched lives far beyond the walls of our workshop. While our global success was a dream come true, it also brought challenges that tested our resolve and ingenuity. As orders grew, so did the complexity of managing operations. Supply chain issues, rising material costs, and the pressure to meet diverse customer expectations became daily hurdles. But as much as these obstacles frustrated me, they also pushed us to innovate in ways I hadn't anticipated. One of the first major issues we faced was maintaining the quality of our products at scale. With more hands involved in production, there was always a risk of inconsistency. To address this, I implemented a comprehensive training program for every new team member. We focused on the core principles that defined our work: attention to detail, respect for materials, and a commitment to excellence. Additionally, I invested in precision machinery that could handle repetitive tasks without compromising the craftsmanship that made our furniture unique. Another challenge was sustainability. As demand increased, so did our consumption of raw materials. I knew that if we continued on this path, we risked losing sight of our values. To combat this, we forged partnerships with suppliers who adhered to ethical practices, sourcing wood from sustainably managed forests. We also started experimenting with reclaimed wood, turning discarded materials into stunning, one-of-a-kind pieces. These efforts not only reduced our environmental footprint but also resonated deeply with customers who valued sustainability as much as quality. Innovation became our lifeline. Faced with tight deadlines and logistical bottlenecks, we embraced new technologies to streamline operations. We implemented inventory management software that allowed us to track materials in real time, ensuring that we were always prepared for incoming orders. On the design side, we adopted computer-aided design (CAD) tools to create more intricate prototypes and explore ideas faster than ever before. These advancements didn't replace our craftsmanship, they enhanced it, giving us the tools to work smarter without sacrificing creativity. Perhaps the most unexpected innovation came from a brainstorming session with my team. We wanted to create a product line that celebrated our global reach while staying true to our roots. The result was a collection of modular furniture inspired by designs from around the world. Each piece could be customized to fit different styles and spaces, making it a hit with customers who appreciated versatility and cultural influences. The success of this collection not only boosted sales but also reinforced our reputation as pioneers in the industry. As we navigated these challenges, I learned an important lesson: adversity isn't a roadblock, it's an opportunity to grow. Every setback forced us to rethink our approach, leading to breakthroughs that made our business stronger and more resilient. And with each innovation, we moved closer to fulfilling our mission of bringing beautiful, functional furniture to customers everywhere. Part 10: A Legacy Built in Wood. Years later, as I reflect on our journey, I'm struck by how far we've come. What began as a childhood passion in my dad's garage has grown into a global brand, recognized for its craftsmanship, sustainability, and innovation. But beyond the accolades and financial success, what matters most to me is the impact we've had on people's lives. I've received countless letters and messages from customers sharing how our furniture has become part of their homes and memories. A dining table where a family gathers for meals and milestones, a desk that supports a budding entrepreneur's dreams, a crib that cradles a newborn baby. These stories remind me why I started this journey in the first place. It's not just about making furniture, it's about creating pieces that bring joy, comfort, and connection. Building this legacy hasn't been easy. There were moments of doubt, failure, and exhaustion. But every challenge was worth it because it taught me something invaluable: the importance of perseverance, adaptability, and staying true to your values. Those lessons have shaped not only the business but also the person I've become. Today, my role has shifted. I'm no longer as involved in the day-to-day operations, entrusting those responsibilities to a talented team that shares my vision. Instead, I focus on mentoring the next generation of woodworkers, sharing the knowledge and experiences that brought me here. Through workshops, speaking engagements, and collaborations with design schools, I've found a new purpose, inspiring others to follow their passions and believe in the power of their dreams. Looking to the future, my commitment to sustainability remains stronger than ever. We've launched initiatives to plant trees for every piece of furniture sold and continue to explore innovative ways to reduce waste. These efforts aren't just good for business, they're a way of giving back to the planet that has given us so much. As I stand in our flagship store, surrounded by the work that represents decades of dedication, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for my parents, who nurtured my love for woodworking, for Mr. Calloway, who believed in me when I needed it most, and for the countless people who have supported our journey along the way. This legacy isn't mine alone, it belongs to everyone who has been part of it. The life I've built is proof that a simple birdhouse can grow into something extraordinary. And while the world may continue to change, the principles that started it all, passion, craftsmanship, and a belief in the power of creation, will always remain at the heart of everything we do.